Greater Creators is a study of creative icons who push the boundaries of art and whose influence can still be felt today. So take a seat, class is in session. Today we're talking about the most iconic filmmaking mastermind of the 20th century, the singular Stanley Kubrick. Hello class, I'm Comic Book Girl 19 and welcome to Greater Creators. Today we're talking about filmmaking genius Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick?
Stanley Kubrick! The late film icon's famous perfectionism, unapologetic creative control, and meticulous processes gave us masterpieces of cinema including Lolita, 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. Kubrick is the very definition of an auteur filmmaker, doing everything his own way, with intimate involvement in casting, screenwriting, editing, lighting, and music. He would even oversee the development of his movie posters. That's how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Wow.
Yeah, he's got his fingerprints all over every aspect of his movies.
Teacher, how do you feel about Stanley Kubrick, honestly?
Honestly, how I feel about Stanley Kubrick? Stanley Kubrick is my boo, okay? Like, Stanley Kubrick is bae. Like, his movies are so insanely layered and intelligent, and there's never been anyone like him, and there will never be anyone like again. Like, he was just once in a generation genius who just brought filmmaking to the next friggin' level, like single-handedly, while working outside of the Hollywood system. I mean, this guy did things his own way. And it's just like, I have so much respect for that. And the fact that he was able to just get the best people to work with him and get them to do their best work is just like such an achievement. I mean, it's like the fact that he has his fingers in every single aspect of filmmaking. And it's like, have you ever made a film? I bet you haven't, because making a film is really hard. And there's like a million things that can go wrong, and there's a million things that are going on. And the fact that he was able to keep all of these things in his head and like make it happen and figure it out, it's just like, what an intelligence. I have all the questions for him, and every time I watch his movies, I see something new, I think about something new, it teaches me something new, and like that's the hallmark of great cinema, you know, of any genius, is just every time you go back to their work, you find out new stuff. And since I've got so much love for Stanley Kubrick, this is gonna be a triple stuffed 3-part episode.
3 parts?
3 parts! Stanley Kubrick was born July 26, 1928 in the Bronx in New York City to Jewish parents Jack and Gert Kubrick. His father was a doctor, and Stanley had a fairly wealthy upbringing. In primary school, Stanley's IQ test revealed him to have above average intelligence, but he had little to no interest in his formal education, skipping school like half of the time. Instead, Stanley would pursue his own interests in literature, Greek and Roman mythology, the fables of the Grimm brothers, and watching baseball on Saturdays.
Why does he skip school all the time?
Well, Robot, he skipped school because he felt like it was just a bunch of nonsense, and he was like better than that, and he just wanted to do what he wanted to do, and he was kind of right. I don't know. Since his parents couldn't seem to get him interested in getting good grades, they instead chose to introduce him to chess and photography when he was in his early teens. Both hobbies became lifelong obsessions, changing Stan's life and preparing him for his future career in filmmaking.
Ooh, I love chess.
Yes. He once said, among a great many other things chess teaches you is to control the initial excitement you feel when you see something that looks good. It trains you to think before grabbing, and to think just as objectively when you're in trouble. With respect to films, chess is more useful, preventing you from making mistakes than giving you ideas. Stan became a member of various Manhattan chess clubs where he dominated in tournament play. He also played for quarters in Washington Square and Central Park, sometimes for 12 hours a day. Later in life, Kubrick was known to play chess on set between takes, regularly beating George C. Scott on the set of Dr. Strangelove, settling any disagreements about creative issues they may have had on the board.
Oh, wow.
He gave writer Jeremy Bernstein unprecedented access to the set of 2001 just because he enjoyed having him around to play chess with. And it's said that Kubrick once called off an entire day of shooting The Shining, which was totally behind schedule, in order to play a match of chess with actor Tony Burton.
That sounds borderline irresponsible.
Man loved chess. Kubrick's lifelong obsession with the game often appeared in his work.
You're going to take my queen?
That is my intention, sir.
Queen to bishop 3. Bishop takes queen.
Wow, he really loved chess.
And he loved photography. He first developed his director's eye shooting dynamic black and white photographs. Stanley's father gave him his first camera at the age of 13, and by 14, the two of them had built Stan his own darkroom in their house for him to work out of. Instead of doing school, by age 16, he was already selling his photos professionally to Look magazine, and after high school graduation at age 17, Stanley Kubrick became the youngest staff photographer in Look magazine's history. He would go on to shoot 27,000 photographs for over 300 assignments.
So he just quit school like that and they just let him walk out and become a photographer and a chess player?
Yes.
Why do I have to be in school?
Well, here's the deal. Stanley has such a low grade point average, and there was also all these guys coming home from the war in World War II, and so they were given preferential treatment. So those two things combined made it impossible for him to get into college. And since he was already had his own darkroom and was really good at photography, he was just like, whatever, I'll just become a photographer. And he did.
Oh, wow.
Stan spent a lot of time perfecting his storytelling and his compositional skills in still photography before he ever even considered making movies.
Oh, wow. So do you think that's where he got his eye for filmmaking?
Absolutely. I mean, he had so much practice making like these really dynamic still photographs that he ended up using all of that knowledge that he had gained from that in order to translate them in moving pictures. And it makes sense because moving pictures is the next logical step for him, because he felt like he had mastered photography, he had mastered the still image, and wanted to challenge himself, and that's kind of why he got into filmmaking.
Oh, neat. I want to become a photographer.
It's a really expensive hobby. When Stanley Kubrick wasn't shooting or playing chess, he went to film screenings at the Museum of Modern Art. And like many budding geniuses, it wasn't the cream of the crop that inspired young Kubrick, so much as it was the bottom of the barrel. I was aware that I didn't know anything about making films, but I believed that I couldn't make them any worse than the majority of films that I was seeing. Bad films gave me the courage to try making a movie. His first short film was a documentary called The Day of the Fight about boxer Walter Cartier, whom he had already done a photographic study on for Look magazine the year before.
He's done it. He's KO'd Bobby James. This is a fighter, Walter Cartier. He's just moved up one more place in a line that may end with a championship.
He sold the documentary to RKO for $4,000, the most the company had ever paid for a film, which encouraged Stanley to quit Look magazine to focus on creating more short films. For his first full-length film, Kubrick took the money he won from chess competitions as well as investments from friends and family and made 1953's Fear and Desire, which got many positive reviews but was a commercial failure. Kubrick's next movie, 1955's Killer's Kiss, was also funded by Stan's friends and family, and it met with limited success. The same year, Kubrick met James B. Harris while playing chess, and the two formed the Harris-Kubrick Pictures Corporation. They moved to LA together, signed with Jaff Agency, and shot 1956's The Killing, Kubrick's first film to be shot with a professional cast and crew.
Get your hands up, all of you. Now, one move out of any one of you, and I'm going to start firing. You, fill that bag up just as fast as you know how.
Having learned lessons from his practice movie, Fear and Desire, Stanley Kubrick considered The Killing to be his very first true feature. Fun fact, Quentin Tarantino cites The Killing as a significant influence on his 1992 film Reservoir Dogs and has stated, "I didn't go out of my way to do a ripoff of The Killing, but I did think of it as my killing, my take on that kind of heist movie." Though the film made little money due to lack of marketing and promotion, the movie impressed Doris Sherry of MGM, who offered Kubrick and Harris $75,000 to write, direct, and produce their next film, Paths of Glory, in 1957, starring Kirk Douglas, which became Kubrick's first commercial success. The Criterion Collection hails the World War I drama as among the most powerful anti-war films ever made. So powerful, in fact, that the movie was banned in France till 1974 because it made the French military look bad in their opinion.
Our troops did attack, sir, but they could make no headway.
Because they didn't try, Colonel. I saw it myself. half of your men never left the trenches.
A third of my men were pinned down because the fire was so intense.
Don't quibble over fractions, Colonel. The fact remains that a good part of your men never left their own trenches.
Kubrick saw his second commercial success when he was hired by Kirk Douglas to replace the director on the Roman epic Spartacus. At 31, Kubrick became the youngest director ever to helm an epic film that was the most expensive movie ever made in Hollywood at that time. Spartacus was well received by critics and audiences, winning 4 out of the 6 Oscar nominations it garnered.
Teacher, what were the lessons Stanley Kubrick learned from Spartacus?
Well, Space Brain, it's important to note that Kubrick was not the original intended director of Spartacus, and he was brought on a week into filming after the previous director had been fired by Kirk Douglas. Stanley learned a lot of lessons from working on Spartacus, but the main lesson he learned was that he never wanted to be in a position where he didn't have complete creative control over a movie ever again.
Why not?
Well, Space Brain, Stanley couldn't make the movie the way he wanted to because he was really working for Kirk Douglas, who was not only the film's star, but also the executive producer. So, he just kind of had to be a director for hire, and that's not something he was into. He's an auteur. He has to be involved in every single aspect of filmmaking for him to be fulfilled artistically.
So what did he do to fix that?
Well, for one, he decided he would never be a director for hire ever again. And from then on, he made sure that he was the catalyst in all of his filmmaking. He chose the book that they adapted, he was a part of all the pre-production. He just made sure that it was his project and not somebody else's.
So was that what he did with his next movie?
Absolutely. Before he started working on his next film, 1962's Lolita, Kubrick moved his entire family to England because working overseas allowed him to create further away from studio interference and censorship.
Did he have problems with studio interference and censorship?
Well, yeah, Kubrick was a benevolent tyrant, okay? He wanted to have final say on all of his movies because he knew better than anybody else what was going on. And Lolita in particular was a very controversial film because it dealt with an older dude having a sexual relationship with a young girl. So he didn't want the studios to be able to come in and tell him no, he couldn't do this or that.
I see.
Lolita follows a middle-aged man's downward spiral into sexual obsession with a pubescent girl and can be seen as a meditation on desire as fuel for America's post-50s explosion of consumerism.
She looks old enough to me.
The controversial black comedy Lolita was based on a famous book of the same name by Nabokov, who also did the screenplay for the film. In fact, all but 2 of Kubrick's feature films were based on books. Though Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita is considered a literary masterpiece, Kubrick generally chose books he felt that he could improve upon. He sought out works with rich detail about the character's inner workings versus specific story moments. In an essay for Sight and Sound, he said these type of books will give the adapter an absolute compass bearing on what a character is thinking or feeling at any given moment of the story. On Lolita, Kubrick practiced his own method of partial improvisation to get memorable performances from his cast. Instead of shooting the script line for line, as many of his actors were used to, he told his actors to first learn their lines, then forget them, and then improvise them on the day of shooting.
Oh. Did that get really good acting?
It did. Something to watch for in Kubrick films is how he's always pushing the story indirectly. One example of this in Lolita is where Humbert and Charlotte are playing a game of chess, and the moves within the game reflect what's really going on inside the minds of the characters in the movie.
You're going to take my queen?
That is my intention, certainly.
Betty, bye, dear.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, Leo.
Lolita was a modest success, but it was a turning point in Kubrick's career, where he made the transition towards the surrealism that marked his later films.
Attack! Russia.
It was on Lolita that Stanley met Peter Sellers and went on to work with him again in his next film, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Peter George's Red Alert served as inspiration for Kubrick's 1964 film, and the movie brilliantly satirized the military-industrial complex, mining the A-bomb fears at the height of the Cold War. What began as a dramatic thriller transformed into another black comedy, as Kubrick pondered the absolute morbid absurdity of arms race towards mutually assured destruction.
I was under the impression that I was the only one in authority to order the use of nuclear weapons.
Teacher, what do you think about Dr. Strangelove?
What do I think about Dr. Strangelove? I think it's amazing. I think it's so great that, like, he just shows what a bunch of fools that these people are in charge. Because, you know, we think, like, at the peasant level, we think that, like, these people in charge within the military-industrial complex and within our political system are, like, these really smart people that, like, really know what they're doing. And he shows them for, like, the dumbasses that they really are, okay? And, like, it was brilliant. It's so great. It's the best satire. And I really feel like this film, in particular, helped to kind of show the people who were in charge of, like, how dumb what they were doing is, and maybe it, in some way, possibly helped stop them making bad decisions.
Are you implying he stopped World War III?
Yes, I'm implying that Stanley Kubrick stopped World War III. This was an enormously controversial film at the time and was, again, filmed in England for both technical and political reasons. At first, Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a serious film about the dangers of nuclear war and mutually assured destruction, but he soon realized that the material was far too depressing to handle in that fashion. So instead, he decided to make light of a dark situation and turned the film into a comedic satire. The film was met with mixed reviews and raised eyebrows within the American government at the disturbingly accurate interior shots of the B-52 bomber that Kubrick's team had made up because at the time, Cold War tensions disallowed technical knowledge about US military war machines to civilians.
So how did he know what a B-52 bomber looked like?
Look, we don't know exactly how his team figured out how to make it look exactly like a B-52 bomber on the interior, but it was so accurate that he was worried that the FBI was going to investigate them.
Oh, wow.
There's the bell. But we're not done with Stanley Kubrick yet. Tune into part 2 where we're going to be talking about Barry Lyndon, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut, my personal favorite movie of his besides 2001. Join us next time on Greater Creators where we're going to discuss the works of other amazing creators who influenced generations. Class dismissed.